Oof. All right. So it's like a super wet hair edition. Like it literally doesn't even look like it got towel dried. I don't know what's going on here. Um, yeah. Before I was getting on, I was like, is it really too much to ask to just like run a hair dryer? Apparently. But yeah. But this is by the time this is over, it'll probably be dry. But anyway, so on this installment, I'm really this is my new intro. So on this installment where we're reading from the Parinama Method, we're at page 198, and this is the interruptions and stressors for expression and communication. So, okay. So the section that we're going to read today is secrets and dissonance. And once again, we're talking about interruptions and stressors to the development of this particular capacity within ourselves, reflexively, neurologically, like even emotionally and cognitively, and and kind of taking like a look back, so this process is about like sort of a reconciliation of the creation of parts of ourselves that we may perceive to be immovable aspects of who we are, or that they're facets of an identity, or of a reality rather, that is just inherently real. And so this is where we're starting to kind of like flex and move around a little bit with the notions that shaped us so that we can understand that there's a malleability to it. So this is a very, like, for me, this is a really particular interruption and stressor. And once again, in each of the hubs, we learn the components as far as the initial development, the basics, which are intended to be like the sort of atomic particles. And then we're looking at the themes, which is like where it's kind of like how the basics sort of interface in sort of the, like the molecular aspect of them relating to other things. And then we look at the interruptions and stressors, which are like, okay, so what are the things in that initial development phase that impact the development, and the shaping, and the like to what extent we like to how expansive and expressed and developed the hub is. And then also when we're going into, with the adaptations, and holding patterns, we're looking at the ways that these reflexes, like how the formation of this actually winds up showing up in our day-to-day lives. And we're just using those to trace the notion of, or like trace an understanding of like how we've potentially been impacted. And especially in the earlier hubs, the behavior is really important because it's all pre-episodic memory. So looking and like being able to kind of trace it back through what, like, what remains, so to speak, or what the evidence is. Is that kind of like a thing where you're like trying to think like what the thing is, like where you're finding evidence? You're like forensics or forensics. And then we look at the expansion and dynamism creation and like the management of the hub with techniques and exercises. So this section in the interruptions and stressors, factors that impact the adult expression, current, mature, or maybe mature, is that right? Expression of the hub. Secrets and dissonance for the fifth hub is like is probably cornerstone to this hub. And I want to make a particular note here that this is where Anadea Judith's book Eastern Body, Western Mind, which was a major influence on me and a major part of my, it's alluded to in the preface, like it was, kind of opened a huge like part of this process for me. It's very, so as it just kind of a pointing to that, it's like the quality of reading that book is really extraordinary for me. But I also, when I was reading it, recognized that it was like very like new age in a sense of like talking about things in very sort of these like very ephemeral like energy and even stuff that I didn't really relate to in the organization of it. That it's kind of like one of those things where you can like get in and really enjoy the ride of it and really take in what's in there. It's very dense. Um, but people who read it have this very like transformational, like many people. It's almost like, so one of the things I'll say about that book is that every person that I think I've ever talked to about that book has had the same kind of experience with it, where it sort of comes into your life in a way that is like, like very like synchronicity or what, or like it sort of comes in, and then it sort of reveals something. It has this quality to it, and the book is very, when I sat down with Anadea this one time, I remember, it's too much of the story for this. Actually, no, it isn't. It isn't for this, but and I'll give the backstory to how that sit down happened. Was that she told me that even writing the book, it had been kind of like it came in a stream of consciousness, and reading it has a very ephemeral quality to it. Like, it is grounded, like, there is practicality to it, which is how I was able to connect with it, but it was still, like, more in kind of this, like, in a new age ideology than I could fully respond to, and so there really was this thing where I was like, "How about, like, a practical, Eastern body, Western mind?" And I talked to her about it, and she, at the time when we spoke, she loved the idea. I'd been very nervous about saying that I wanted to do that, which is Pranama method is very much in like a product of that. No doubt, if you know the two books, you'll definitely be able to see the the relation that they have with each other. Um, but yeah, I remember that she said that, like, she had to write it really quickly. It was, like, a part of a book deal after she'd written her, like, big, Wheels of Life book, and that it just tended to work really like, she'd have a client that would come in that would, like, totally represent something that, was, like, part of what she was writing about, and that, I think, is, like, kind of a qualitative aspect that's very similar to how Parinama came to be, in this very kind of otherworldly, like, getting into, like, the jet stream and just reading hundreds of books and having the right conversations happen and the right things happen, like, because I mean, like, one thing that is, certainly as I'm reading it now is really clear is, like, the scope of this, and we haven't even, I mean, we still have about, like, 130 pages to go, and those, like, it just it keeps hitting. Like, it doesn't slow down. This is not a book at any point where it's like, like, where people have, like, one great idea, and then the book is kinda, like, working to sort of create volume around it. If anything, the challenge was how to make the book less dense, and so some of the organization, like, that each of these are sort of sections, and some of the and that we're talking about, like, the structuring of each of the hubs and how that exploration happens, is like really like an attempt to actually make this accessible in a particular way that, um, I don't know if it's intended to be as accessible as I'd hoped it would be. As I'm reading this and doing it and having a practice and doing a cycle with it, I'm realizing that it's kind of like the secret garden kind of thing, where I do think that there's some safety in really having to have the intent to enter in order to have the experience, which is something definitely that I've come to understand in this past year without question. But what the thing back to Anadea, um, I mean, like, another example of that is I was doing a workshop with her, but you've to consider, it was at Kripalu, which is, like a has, hundreds of people, and our workshop had, 50 odd people, and I was, kind of maybe more. I don't remember. But like that, this one day I was sitting in the cafeteria having lunch. I was sitting by myself, and then she just sat down with me. And that kind of synchronicity with all of this, it was like October 17th. I remember the date just because it's 2019. 2019? Yeah. Um, in that particular moment, like, and that we had this very particular conversation. And I don't know how, I don't know how much of it she remembers, and I don't know how much of that even matters, but um bless me. But like it's almost, I almost feel like so I'll say the reason I didn't, like, I was like slowing myself down, then I kind of like jumped back in, is because I do, in the earlier parts of the book, there's a lot more allusion and sort of like tipping of the hat towards Eastern Body, Western Mind, and Anadea. Like, I actually think there was even a thing in the last couple pages that was like a reference to her. But Secrets and Dissonance, this notion that she presents in when she's talking about the fifth chakra is the this like this really comes from her work, like this very idea. And I don't know if it would have arisen without having read Eastern Body, Western Mind, but I mean, I'll never have to learn one way or the other. But yeah, I mean, I think the thing is like a tip of the hat, just to her and her influence on this and her impact on my life and the creation of this book, and as a result, the impact that her work has had on anyone affected by this. And I think my understanding of what that actually means is, um, anyone who partakes in this is like kind of like in this work of, like, I guess, like, I'll call it self-actualization as a placeholder, but, like, it's actually, like, personal. It's, like, to liberate yourself. And, oh, you know what? I'm not gonna say any more about that. That's all I'm gonna say on that. So, okay, that's it. Yeah. Yeah, it's so actually the one sort of what I will say is that, it's a special thing to find yourself connected and activated to this. It's representative of something, and part of the full recognition of what it means to begin to unify this internal divide and really come into integrity and come into this like authentic expression. It is beyond explanation. It's and to a certain extent, I don't know if beyond explanation, I think it's just kind of like there's only so much that could be comprehended from a certain level of consciousness around this. So it's almost like the stepwise of just each little bit, it's like sort of like increasing the capacity to understand what's actually possible in this, is how this works. So a lot of, it's like I was having a conversation with someone last week, and I was like, I understand it's really hard to give up things that you don't understand are working because you don't know what you're giving them up for. But and I can't tell you it is, because it's not even anything that we understand to want from a current perspective. But to have the notion of like building a bridge back to these moments, like a unification of these moments of having felt fully like in your life, like fully like sort of enlivened by the experience of a moment, and yourself, and and just the kind of extraordinariness of like things that just arise through you, things you've done, that have been like, wow, like proud accomplishments. And like, it's not the accomplishment, it's like that sense of like where that came from. And this is about building a bridge to that and realizing that everything that has ever that's ever come up through that, that when we have these adaptations, they'll immediately jump in and start saying, I did that. And then when the thing is, so they keep us on the other side from building the bridge back to that. So the adaptations keep being like, see, I did that. It was like the fact that, I'm neurotic and I'm always, and the fact is that it's like this arisingness has this kind of continuous gift that passively sort of is just like kind of coming up of our authenticity and the desire and like the joy of following that. Not that it means that the life in this stays always joyful, by the way, but that what we're talking about is like the bridge back to something we already know, but has been distorted in terms of like our understanding of what it is. And even, and so what we're doing here is like we're bit by bit sort of deconstructing this stuff so that like the return to that, it will spontaneously arise in your way, in the way that makes sense for you. So I guess full circle, when I'm saying, if you're for anyone who's coming towards this, there is something that like this aspect of yourself is trying to actualize and find. And so if you're here, I'm telling you, this is something really special, as far as kind of just taking a moment to kind of be like, hey, I feel you. So let's do some reading. The wet hair session. And also like keep in mind, I mean, I don't know what the future holds, but I can tell you these are materially becoming more esoteric in terms of what I'm talking about. But it maps, because as we're getting into the upper hubs, it gets it gets really interesting where we're going with this. And yeah, believe me, it doesn't disappoint where we're going. So but it doesn't disappoint where we're going. But the thing is it's harder to arrive the more we are still carrying kind of calcified adaptations. And also like if we're carrying shame, if we're carrying fear, I mean, there's all like this is like not a thing where it's like it's binary, where it's like there's not, it's like kind of the more we're doing like in the space of like the exploration and the softening and dissolving of this, and just being able to start to distinguish the like this sense of what I'm talking like kind of talking about here. The more we can trust it and hear it and follow it, and then it kind of leads to extraordinary things. And so it's almost like it's dissonance is the word here, but there's almost like a thing where there's a competing voice, and it turns out that the one that is misleading is louder, like shame. But there's the underlyingness is more powerful. This underlying integrity is more powerful. So like why we're sitting here right now, why you're listening to this right now, why I'm talking, why I'm having this experience right now, has to do with the fact that this quality is like will not like it will arise. Like it'll arise. It will, yeah. So there, ta-da. We did it. There's that. It's really amazing, like how I do not plan for I'm very, very, like when I come into this, I really allow, like I follow this divining rod of what is arising that feels like it should, like has energy behind it, this quality. And even if it's like a cool idea and it's crusty, and sometimes it's crusty from like just 3 minutes old, like where I was thinking about it while I was like drawing up the little thumbnail for the video. and then it's just crusty, it's not working, so it's kinda like, okay, that gets left behind. So, I'll even make notes sometimes about, like I'll be like, "Oh, yeah, that," and then it's like, as you can see, this is what wanted to be expressed, or just what works for right now or whatever, but, okay. Yeah, I did write some notes down. The 2 notes, let's see. So the one thing I'll say is that doing this in earnest, doing this work, and if you're starting to watch these and you're kind of thinking like, "Oh, I'd actually like to start from the top," just keep in mind under lives in all of these videos, it goes all like we're reading start to finish, so you can go all the way back to the beginning. If you care to do that, if you haven't like seen them all, if that's something that calls to you, having the book, whatever, uh, it like is helpful in this process. But the thing I'm getting to is that do not be surprised if you find yourself getting tired. If you find yourself needing more rest, deeper rest, that dreams are more evocative, and we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up in the next chapter. But don't be surprised, like, and try to allow yourself to have that, to realize that some of the things, especially when with some of the somatic shifting, and we don't do too much of that in the book expressly. That's something it's like I'll have to figure out how that lives in the world, but that is kind of like yeah, it's just a whole thing, but just, like, being like, I wanna just acknowledge that, like, that's a thing. One of the other things too, which is, like this is a little bit more on the, like, mystical side, is noticing that things start to die, which seemed like it might be like, "Oh my god, this is, very antithetical to what I think is happening." But, I mean, this can be things like electronics, certain, like, relationships, plants, even I mean, just things in your house, like breaking, dying, get like, just needing, like, things exiting. So, I'm just making note of that. I wanna just, like, give that as a validation for anyone who's like, "How's this happening?" and might think it's weird or even antithetical. But as we'll get into, when we get further up, is, like, there is kind of a culling. There's, like, a clearing of, like, oldness, and also, like, the thing of, like, cleaning and, like, getting things, more clear and even becoming more conscious of, like, dustiness and stuckness and, like, moving things around in your house, like, feeling like the energetic quality, that also is something that happens. Okay, and we're gonna go. There's, like there was just me being like, "Yeah, all the new age shit," or, like, don't this book hard to relate to. Like, fuck. It's like I lived a crystal with, like, a plume of smoke behind me or some, like, sage smoke and incense. I'm burning incense back there. Oh my god. Oh my god. Dissonance. Like, secrets and dissonance. Yeah, one of the it's like kind of like live like demonstrations with these because it's like what was the one before where I like told 7 active lies in the while I was talking about like oh my god. Okay, Secrets and Dissonance I'm gonna start reading. Oh my god, it just is like so ridiculous. I love it. Okay, let's do this. Look at my hair. Look at it drying. See, who needs a hair dryer? Okay, if if we keep a secret, we can't be completely at ease and spontaneously respond to people. Almost everything must pass through a filter, and to a greater or lesser extent, a secret keeper must always be vigilant. So, I mean, pressing pause on reading. This is something, when I so as far as my own my like when I spent time like on this and thinking about it and working on it, um, like, that was something you when you wanna talk about, like, the rigidity of adaptations and having to, like, shift yourself, um, out of integrity to, like, one of the things about is, like, secret keeping means, like, we always have to be kinda, like, checking something about, like, whether it makes sense relative to like, the lie or the deception or whatever. And especially, like, the thing is, and we're really not getting into this thing like liars or, like, assholes. It's more like, why do you lie? Like, why would you not feel safe enough to tell the truth? And so one of the things about so this is the position we're coming to with lying about, by the way. And there's all sorts of different, like, varieties of lying, but here, what we're talking about in the context of ourselves, Parinoma method, our development is lying as a form of protection. So, and making note of the fact that there's, like, kind of a, like we cannot spontaneously arise, 'cause we like, there's just similar to, like, the rigidity that forms in the other hubs. This happens. So, in a Day of Judith, remember how I, like, never write about her and it was time to talk about her? Apparently, it's right here. Dissonance. Dissonance too. Who's keeping score? Um, okay, so Anna Ju Anna Judith, sorry. It's like yeah, right? I mean, like I love it. I just thought I mean, this I guess, like, let's see how to articulate this. Yeah, I don't know, I'm not gonna articulate it's just funny. So Anna Day of Judith writes that when we keep a secret, quote, "We have to guard against talking about the things that matter most." So for people threatened with terrifying consequences if they tell, keeping a secret cuts off the ability to feel fully alive and connected to important people in our lives. Yeah, I mean, there really are deeper implications there where it's like when we're not telling someone something, it's not just the thing that we're not telling them, we're like blocking the authenticity of the relationship. Or I'm not even gonna say we are, the authenticity is being blocked because I think there's a when we're talking about personal relationships is unpopular notion is this would likely be is that lying is like the thing about, this was something that came up for me in my like the first cycle with this was that telling the truth represents feeling safe. So it's kind of like if we don't feel safe enough, and there's like of course there's personal responsibility in this, but I just want to make a note of that, like that there's this interaction in that. And the disc like and how and the cost of more than just this like the singular deception. And I don't want to like I mean look the yeah, I'm not going to go down this too far because I realize like having any kind of defense against deception or lies is I mean when we get into it in the holding patterns, I'll do more with that. But I realize there's a lot of like stuff where it's like lying is just uniformly like bad. I hate liars and all this kind of shit. Well, yeah, you know, which there's just a lot more nuance in deception and lying. So growing up in a home with secrets is confusing for a child. On the one hand, we're being told to tell the truth and be honest. And on the other hand, we're seeing and experiencing our family do the opposite. Worse yet, pointing out secrets before we knew they were forbidden topics can lead to being snapped at, yelled at, or even punished or abused. Siblings often secretly convene to compare information about and to decode their parents' secrets and incomplete information result in fixations on topics like sex and parental dynamics. Children will sometimes covertly inspect the rooms and belongings of their parents. This exploration and fascination can feel illicit. Still, the urge that compels the behavior is the deep curiosity to really know our parents, possibly based on the dissonance we experience between what they say and what we sense and see. We notice the difference usually when their words lie, but their body language and tone continue to tell the truth. And even their actions. It's like the do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. It's terrible. It's a terrible thing. So if a mother hangs up the phone and her shoulders slump with a look of hopelessness on her face, and she says to her children, Daddy has an exciting work dinner and won't be coming home, the children will question this dissonance initially and reflexively. Although eventually, with repetition, children will likely surrender their inner knowing so that they do not increase their mother's pain and to restore harmony to the best of their ability. The reflex to harmonize the dissonance in our home by changing ourselves is a survival mechanism. Mhm. This really I mean, the thing is this really introduces and this is why I think when, like, coming into the interruptions and stressors, I was, like, kind of be prepared for some stuff that can be pretty evocative, which is to understand, um, like, some of the very subtle things that we have had to do in order to, like and, like, why we did them, and to what extent we convinced ourselves. So it's almost like to remove the dissonance, there's, like, the self-deception. So instead of having to deal with that conflict, that to even, like, go a step further, to really just keep slacking over it until it's like, "Yeah, no, this is true, this is true. I'm learning." And even the rationalization where it's like, "Okay, my nat" like, it's being kind of, like, trained to know what's like, this is the real world kinda thing. Um, so there's a lot in terms of contemplation with this that can be really important in this particular process for some folks. So, as children, we were sponges absorbing everything around us. When we're developing our intuition and learning to trust our instincts, being told what we suspect is wrong when it isn't, or being given incomplete information affects this calibration process between the outside world and our inner knowing. And then calls back to the second hub as well, like, as in terms of attunement and the role that plays on emotional literacy and feeling kind of synced in with the world, like, what that's supposed to be doing with that. Okay. I'm, like, kinda waiting for a burp to possibly pass. Boop. Okay. As adults, we may become agitated and activated when we sense that what we are being told conflicts with what is happening, or worse, we may accept it because we are familiar with disregarding our intuition and instincts. Yeah. So, once again, I'm going to read that again. So, as adults, we may become agitated and activated when we sense that what we are being told conflicts with what is happening. So, with what is actually happening. Or worse, we may accept it because we are familiar with disregarding our intuition and instincts. Secrets require ongoing management, and the expenditure of subconscious energy leads to stress and tight muscles. Although it can be difficult when we unburden ourselves of a secret, we tend to experience relief, softening, and more energy. Hmm. Yeah, I'm feeling a personal, like, I'm having a reaction to that, and one of the things I, like, planted my feet on the ground, I realized I was, like, kind of going up on my sort of the sides of my feet and kinda starting to be, like, a little, kind of creating a, like, distancing myself from it, even kinda shutting down. So I read that section again, 'cause that's, I mean, one of the things is that it's kind of like in this, like, process of, like, reading and doing this practice, there are sometimes things where it's like where there needs to be sort of a gentleness of allowing. So I'm taking a moment for myself right now, actually. Um, mm, yeah, something very evocative is rising for me in this. Um, and it's like, usually if I'm gonna talk about it here, it's something I've processed a little bit more, but I'm probably gonna spend some time with that today. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something that, and certainly not that, like, layers to what we, as a protection, convince ourselves to be true. There's a lot of, like, there's a lot of, um, kind of the notion that the world is hard, but if I'm skillful in, like, becoming this thing that it wants, it will give me what I want. That is a thing. And that 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 kind of skill is kind of like what, the sort of, like, from the Bible, it's like, what is, for a man to gain the world but lose his soul, like, that's that. Where it's kind of like, okay, one of the things about, like, difficult circumstances have taught me how to kind of shape shift as it relates to what other people want me to be so I can remain safe and get what I think I want. And there's a very important differentiation between some of this possibility, like this is, I'm going to talk about this, is that it's the difference here. Okay, I'm gonna, like, let this the difference is being able to have this experience that has that quality of safety, of creation, like world creation, that is actually arising as a, like, point of integrity, of authenticity, versus having that externalized into a quality where it's shifting in order to create. So these two things can seem like they might be the same thing, and I'm sorry, like, so I don't this might be something where I can only point to it, and it's kind of like, if it resonates, it resonates. But the thing about being able to make the world safer and also more abundant in it so I'll talk about it as far as abundant. I'm not even gonna talk about safety. To make the world abundant in a way that is, like, sort of like giving others what they need so that you get what you want. Like, so in this kind of thing where it's like a learned thing versus understanding that what's arising out of you actually creates this without the concession. That one's kinda super esoteric, so feel free to disregard. Feel free to not, and there should, like, if I ever got to a place where this is more sophisticated, I'd put, like, timestamps, like, just disregard this part if you c like, proceed if with caution. Um, just like where people are like, "Timestamp, go to 38:49 for whatever." Okay, so I'm gonna wrap this up. It's kinda yeah. Okay, so body language is perhaps the more reliable communicator of truth after all. It's over 50% of what we communicate. Body language expert Janine Driver teaches in You Say More Than You Think, her book, that shrugging, even slightly, is a tell of uncertainty. Like, it's real. Like this, like when somebody's like, "Well, I can't." It's like, "Well, could we make this happen?" And it's like, "Well, I can't." It's like, so like even when it's just like like a, um, regardless of what the person is saying. In addition, she writes, when we don't like what we see or hear, our lips disappear, referring to the mannerism of folding lips inward. And you could even go as far as saying, like, that's kinda like trying to, like, extension of this of, like, holding back the response that's naturally arising. So, some of her tells for untruthfulness are pointing the torso and navel away from the person you are deceiving, using the body to block or hide an object associated with a deception, for example, standing in front of a pack of cigarettes. Oh, no, I have no idea where that came from. Um, behaving differently, prolonged or shortened eye contact, slowing or speeding up speech, and in some cases, scratching the nose. Oh, yeah, I think that so one of the things that is, like, as far as body language, that like, for all the reading and stuff I did about it, it ultimately is about, like, behaving differently is, like, kind of the thing. So, there's that. So, anyway, I think we got it. We did it. We did it again. Oops, we did it again. Um, oh my god. My neighbor is really weird. I can see them outside the window. Okay. So fucking upset. So anyway, that is it for secrets and dissonance. Next, the last interruption and stressor of this hub is shame and unspoken standards. Unsurprisingly, shame shows up again. And unspoken standards, once again, is like pointing to the um, things that we learn through just being sort of like it's almost like lightning striking out of nowhere kind of thing of like punishment, or like a reaction where it was never explained to us like this is something we don't talk about. All you learn that it's not talked about by being punished for talking about it, right? um and and how that is like for a small body, for a small developing psyche, it's like looking at a lot of this stuff in the context of like of who is receiving this is like like just how like malleable and soft and innocent and gentle that is. And I mean, one thing is like one thing that gets in the way of being able to connect to this notion is if you subscribe to notions like original sin, that a child is like it's already full of sin. So like, but it's like no, or just like fuck that. It's disgusting. That notion is disgusting. um Yeah, it's, like, fucking gross, like, the idea to, like, be like a child is born full of sin. It's like to oof. And so, if that's it's like that, and you just look at the innocence of a child, and you look at, like, even the thing of, like, a will arising, the child would be, like, asking for things or wanting things or seeking pleasure and being able to, like, be tactile and sensual, like, that's just, like, these arising natural aspects of our humanity coming into development. So all of these things, it's like this is yeah, I mean, like, so back to unspoken standards, that it's like this naturally arising self just being like, just absolutely shocked, you know? It's kind of like, in some ways, these types of adaptations when it comes to are so rapid, fierce, and like unpredictable because they came out of nowhere. It's almost like if you had, if your home had experienced a natural disaster, it's like you would absolutely make changes to your house to protect against the next one, or he'd move. So you'd either dissociate, or you would, like, maybe it's like, emergency prepared kit, fortifications in your house, more insurance, whatever. But you're like, the thing is, you're going to really start to, like, kind of create protections against kind of these shocks, and kind of in this notion of, like, how do I protect from this never happening again? I never want to feel that way again. So anyhow, okay. So we did it. Let's see. Ooh, we're at page 199. So we won't cross the threshold in the next reading, but we're getting there. It's kind of like we're doing it. So anyway, thank you so much. Like I always say, I should probably say this in the beginning, but thank you so much for all the interaction, comments, Mira, Kristen, anyone who is sending me DMs about stuff that you want to talk about, likes, anything. It does. I really do appreciate it. It really makes me feel like we're starting to, and that we're in a discussion around this. And like I've said a lot, is I'm really looking forward to when this actually is more of an active discussion. But right now, this is what is possible, is this format, which is just talking to future you. Past Katie is talking to your present you, which is actually future you relative to me right now. So anyhow, enough of that. I absolutely appreciate you so much. I adore you, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye for now.